Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry to speak in English. I could do it in Spanish, but maybe you don't understand. So I hope that the experiences that we have had in Mexico will be of interest to you. And I will go directly into the different subjects. That is, why did we change the institutional framework and why did we have now a regulator? I will talk as well about some specific cases that I have heard today out of interest to Basilicata, like the impact assessments, the new refineries, the national content, meaning to what extent the companies locally can intervene in the oil business, and then some development funds that exist in Mexico, but I was also asked to talk a bit about the development funds in Norway. Well, the institutional setwork is very important. After the Macondo accident, as you might know, there has been a very large debate how to regulate the oil industry. In the case of Mexico, what is important is not only a ministry now relating to the oil industry, it's also a number of regulators, but particularly now the regulation in the exploration and production to change very much the rules of the game. What is the purpose of this? Well, first is that the ministries not always have the competency to understand the oil business. So very much is to have a competent advisor that belongs to government, and that's one of the jobs that we have to do. Then we have to define the technologies and the technological progress that is happening in exploration and production. Then we have to assess that technology, because the companies will tell us something, but then we will have to see on behalf of the nation what is really the best. Then the observance of the regulation, who is going to do that? Will the ministries have the capacity to really oversee and to supervise? And then finally, to approve the evaluation of the reserves. How much do we really have? Is what Pemex tells us that they have, or an assessment that we can have on behalf of the nation? There's in these debates now 2 points of view. How do you regulate the industry? The traditional way has been very prescriptive. That means that it's full on, the characteristic is that it's full of details and detailed regulations with very compulsory standards that are supposed to be very high. It implies very little flexibility for the operator, since they have to do exactly what they are told to. What is the operator doing? They present the plans, the environmental impact assessments, and then they have to be submitted and approved. But these approvals are generally granted more quickly, and there is always pressure on the authority to give the support to the operator. So the regulator play also a very active role in the requirements and the enforcement. That's the traditional way. Now, there's this other view that happens very much in the North Sea, and many of you will recognize it, and it is performance-based. It means that the government also has objectives. It's not only the oil industry, the government as well. And then this demands a very strong participation from the industry, the employees, and the regulators in terms of expertise and management. What do they want is that the regulation of the business emphasizes on efficiency rather than maximum oversight. The government has no capacity to be there all the time. So the operator must prove they have identified the technology, the methods, the risks, and the equipment that meet the objectives. And the regulators must be ready to participate in this process. That demands that the regulator has become very professional in this business, and then to be able to supervise. Now, both of these approaches, what is happening in the world is that they are becoming one hybrid of both of them. And that's the approach that we are having. First of all, we have to see the internal standards that Pemex has been working with, and to design a new specific regulation. Finally, to reach the technical assessment of all the exploration and production projects, which is complemented with the supervision and the inspections. In the Talking about the technical assessment, what is important here is that all the projects, once they are submitted to the regulator, we have to see many elements, but some of them which are very important is to attain the maximum recovery rate. I don't know what's going to be the recovery rate here in Basilicata, but that's the first element of a good environmental use of your resources. It's exactly to obtain as much as you can from your reservoirs and to evaluate the alternative technologies. And simultaneously, the safety and environmental management that includes the flaring and the venting of the gas, the risk assessments, the contingency plans, and the proof of financial responsibilities. As you know now, after the Macondo issue, it has become more and more expensive to demonstrate to any government that you have the capacity to pay back and to restore a situation in case of contingency. That is the first part I wanted to talk about. The second, which is very important, probably you have to consider as well, is why accidents happen in the oil industry. Here the list is very long. Of course, I cannot go through them. Here are 15 items that Pemex has identified why these accidents actually did happen. That's what we are all afraid of, because not only it puts in danger the life of the crews and the employees, but finally it has a repercussion on society and the environment. That's exactly where we are most afraid. So what we want is to avoid the accident from the very beginning. And the frequent route of the accidents is linked with the insufficient integration of efforts through a management system. Even though a very well-renowned company like BP knew everything and probably were among the best in the world, they failed in the human aspects rather than in the technology. Here it's a comparison that we made of the different companies, how they tackle the health, safety, and environmental issues. Pemex also had to make a choice. I want simply to describe here that a good management system of health, safety, and environment has to consider the human factors, the methods, and the installations. They are very alike among companies. It's actually this chart, what is showing you is that all of them seem to have the same philosophy. Some of them will go further away, and even, for example, Shell looking with less number of items, they cover them precisely as they should. So the longer the list not necessarily demonstrates that it's better. It's simply that all the items are taken into consideration. So what did we take into consideration in Pemex? It was the human factor, the leadership policy, and the compromises. What we have seen is that there's too much delegation in the oil industry, and sometimes we don't see the directors really involved and committed. The organization, the training, there has been much advance in the technologies, but the personnel has not been trained properly to encompass the technical progress with the organization. The occupational health is part as well, research and information and the incidents. Many of these things, people works alone as if they were a little island, and they are not informed of what is actually happening in their closest environment so that they can participate. The control of suppliers, as I was saying, most of these problems happen because there's too much third-party engagements, and they are not complying with the same standards that the companies would like to have. There's a good community and public relations that are also part of this human factor. The systems, they are large, but they include the technological processes, the risk analysis, and the installations. They must have the emergency plans and the mechanical integrity and repairs as part of these systems. That completes a second view, so I'm going to a third view that was very relevant to Mexico. Probably it will become relevant to you, maybe not, but it's the flaring and the venting of the gas.